Today we begin Beasts of Chaos Week. We are going to be diving into this battle tome in depth, talking about it as a whole, and really breaking down the various sub-factions. It's a incredibly monumental task to do this because they've kind of crammed so many little factions together in one book. It's going to take more than a week to really flesh it all out. In addition to that, we're also going to take a look at the new Start Collecting box to make sure that I have a review for every single one of them and ensure that you all understand a great starting point to this army. But before we dive into that, what are the Beasts of Chaos? Well, frankly, they are a new kind of army. They're not truly unified or even uniform. Generally speaking, though, it is a collection of chaos-based monsters, beasts, mutants, that kind of thing. These are the true children of chaos and its warping powers. Generally speaking, they do not dedicate themselves to a particular chaos god, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. They can, however, but most of them see Chaos Undivided as the true tenet of their faith. And they come in many forms, from wild creatures and animals. Some are more traditional, like kind of slightly mutated dogs that become chaos hounds, and then other things are more exotic, like the cockatrice and creatures where it looks like an amalgamation of other monsters combined. And another thing that's prevalent in the army is sort of this half-man, half-animal thing. These are your gores, the war herd, the ungores, which typically puts kind of a man and a goat or a bull and smash them together, and that's pretty much what you get. Now, I want to note here, very interestingly, that the battle tome goes very far in multiple places out of its way to acknowledge the fact that there are different kinds of mutations. For example, the models that we get for gores realistically are kind of goat-like. I think we can all agree on that, but it does state that there are like horse variations, so it's horse and man and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of different mutations. We just have these models to represent that. Now, as I said, they are a force that is not unified. They are shattered and scattered all across the mortal realms. But what unites them are these dark, tribalistic cultures. They all want civilization torn down, and they want the warping chaos power to reign supreme, to bathe in slaughter, to throw off any masters and see their enemies fall before them. And their goals kind of put them in an interesting place. When I covered Gur, the Realm of Beasts, we talked kind of a lot like this. They don't want kings, they don't want civilization, or fortifications or walls. They want total, unabashed freedom. It is life unchained, almost like they are the savage equalizer in the realms. And there are a lot of similarities, to be fair. A lot of the same elements and language are present amongst those two pieces of lore. In fact, most beastmen, which is a term that the book still uses to describe a lot of the various sub-factions in here, are hesitant to devote themselves to one particular chaos god because that means you're asserting him as an authority over you, and they're not about that. They don't want to bow before anyone, even a chaos god. So on the surface, they can look very similar to a destruction army, but the difference comes from their motivations for this lifestyle. For destruction armies, they see no one as their heir or ruler of the realms. The world is fine the way it is, it's just a matter of the people who play in it and interact in it. And this eternal conflict of war is determining who has the right to survive in these realms. Right, it's very food chain oriented, dog eat dog type stuff, but ultimately the world is a generally good place and we can all fight for survival within it. However, with the Beasts of Chaos, they fight specifically for the kind of all-consuming and warping power of Chaos Undivided. They don't see the world as fine. In their mentality, chaos, change, and warping is the norm. It's order and structure that is wrong somehow, and that needs to be changed. Only when the warping energies of chaos wash over all of creation will it be made good. Will it conform to their image of right. And to that end, they form the most tribalistic and savage religious crusade imaginable, and do it in the most disorganized way. If you had to pick a faction that defined the word chaos, and I mean our literal word chaos in the real world, it is the Beasts of Chaos. No structure, no organization. There's a few ways we classify them a little bit, which we're going to talk about in tomorrow's video. But all in all, the nature of how they build their armies, where they are, what their motivations are, the trail of destruction they leave behind is the perfect definition of the word chaos, which is why they consider themselves, we are the true sons of chaos. Sure, there are chaos gods who have their individual things that they like, but we take it holistically. We want the whole world to be like this. And what's fascinating about this faction, because when it stuck out to me, I was like, okay, how are they going to introduce this kind of army, right? Is it going to be like the power of chaos has flooded enough to mutate people since the Age of Chaos, and they kind of rose up from the woods? Like, that's kind of my assumption before I picked the book up. But what's fascinating is that they've been around since the birth of the realms. We often think that chaos entered the realms in the Age of Chaos. It makes sense, that's the name that was given. But the Battle Tome specifically says that the beasts of chaos were actually in the realms before Sigmar stirred. Like, way, way back in the beginning. This is like a preamble to the books that we have. Every piece of lore that we've known pretty much universally starts when Sigmar wakes up. When he's corralling around the realms, trying to get all the survivors together, all humans he can find, these tribes of Dwarven and human, and trying to build the first civilizations and make things great in the Age of Myth. The thing that they're fighting against is the beasts of chaos. This kind of very almost natural chaos that existed in the realms before. These kind of tiny human tribalistic societies were hiding, like in a cave and stuff, from the beastmen that prowled the woods. So in a sense, they've always been in the realms, and Sigmar led crusades to drive them back. And when they were driven back into like the mountains and caves and far out places, this is really when the Age of Myth began, when civilization could burst forth into a bustling society. Now, we're going to talk about this here towards the end, but I find that very fascinating that they've always been there. And so we're going to dive into the 3 theories that their Battle Tome gives us regarding their origins. There is a theory of the Alpha Progenitor, which is scholars have scoured the realms looking for clues to try and figure out where did this faction come from? How are they here before any of us? And they found a series of glyphs in Gur, like these little markings and important symbols carved into stone, and they tell the story of a lone beastman. Some natural occurrence happened in this like passing energy of chaos, just kind of whisked across the realm real quick, like a breeze blowing past the side of a mountain, and it was enough chaos energy to somehow warp him, and he became the first beastman. And as such had a kind of innate understanding of chaos and how to wield it. And so he was kind of the first, if you will. He was the both Adam and Eve, and being able to wield that magic corrupted others, mutated others, and spawned this entire species, or subspecies, if you will. And some of the great Brays, which we'll talk about later in the week, still honor and worship their idea of the first of us. And there are a few implications to that story. We'll talk about that towards the end of this video. The second theory put forward was the idea of the warping winds. This is the concept that there are particular places or nodes of kind of chaotic power in the realms. If a civilization is too close to one of these, people can begin to warp and mutate, as they have preceding generations of children and babies and such. Now, this theory also has kind of two-parter. One, it says, no, they weren't around when Sigmar first awoke. That's all just myth, it's legend. That's just tribal stories we told around campfires when we didn't know what we were looking at. But this theory of the idea of the warping winds states that power, that chaos energy, didn't start until the Age of Chaos, which reasonably sounds like the things that we've heard of so far in the books, at the expense of saying, no, everything that happened around Sigmar's time was a myth. So I can understand why some people would believe this. And the third theory is often called the Corporeal Chaotic Ax. This is a research paper and a philosophy in one, and it sees the Beast of Chaos as kind of being an integral part of the realms. The idea being here that reality itself has a natural tendency to unravel, as if like the old world fell apart because it was always going to, because the natural inclination of things that are structured and ordered is to decay and fall apart. Not decay as in like Nurgle's rot, but I mean just things crumble, they age, they turn to dust. And the idea is that the beasts of chaos are the spawn of that kind of natural element of chaos in existence. And I like this one because it almost poses chaos to the realms as yin and yang, right? They're two opposing forces, but they interact with each other. So from that perspective, the Beasts of Chaos are a very natural element to the realms, which kind of helps explain why they were always there, just like the realms, to everyone's knowledge, were always there. But now I want to answer a question that I am very excited to dive into, and that is, what is Chaos Undivided? Because we have a whole bunch of new players who have only ever known Chaos as the 4 Chaos Gods. And that's fair, because that's the only context we've been given so far as the grander narratives, so that we have Grand Alliance Chaos, and we have Ever-Chosen, and there's 4 Chaos Gods, and that's pretty much what we've been seeing so far. But that's not quite accurate. Chaos itself is an overarching, impersonal force that warps and mutates and corrupts. It poisons and consumes. It is the dark side of reality made manifest. It is a dimension outside of the realms that is a place of nightmares, unreality, where time and space mean nothing. It is somehow infectious and has a tangible effect on things. And with that kind of realm of non-existence, we know of 4 major beings, and these are the Chaos Gods. And while they are an integral part of chaos and how we understand it, they are not its entirety. For the Beasts of Chaos specifically, they tend to see aligning yourself to a specific Chaos God as weakness. Now some do, but most don't. Why would you bow before another? Why would you let their narrow-minded goals define your life? In this case, the narrow-minded goals is kind of the path to glory that each of these Chaos Gods has laid out for his followers. Why not do the things that they all enjoy, and instead of just limiting yourself to one? Gluttony, disease, bloodshed, magic. To follow a certain god is to limit yourself. It's a shallow and narrow-minded idea. Instead, dedicate yourself to Chaos Undivided. Bask in its radiant change, bathe in its bloodshed, breathe in the excess, and infect the world around you. Do it all, and do it for no one else. You are your own master, a herald and devotee of the truth beyond reason or proof. Your church is the nightmares of men. You worship the expression of chaos, destruction of power and authority, breaking the illusion of control. And you do this until the world is consumed by darkness and change. And only then will the realms see the truth, that chaos is the norm, and that order is the anomaly that needs fixing. And now how do they bring that power, that madness into the realms? Well, while we're talking about things that kind of span the entire army, because like I said, it's a very diverse faction, the one thing I want to put here is the idea of the Herdstone. Because the Herdstone is integral to sharing that kind of warping, overarching power in the realms. A Herdstone acts as a node or nexus of pure chaos power. It is generally unaligned. Every time we talk about beastmen or beasts of chaos not aligning themselves to a chaos god, there is always the possibility that some beast lord will. So I want to put that little asterisk there. What I'm talking about is the general norm. And for a Herdstone, the general norm is to put out this kind of wave of pure chaos power. It mutates everything around it. Think of it kind of as a cell tower. It's just projecting this kind of area of effect in a given space. This range can be increased by acts of savagery or debauchery at its base, or blood sacrifices, or if it's just around a long time. These things are almost like living. So the longer they're around, they grow and they exude greater and greater power over an area. If you are, say, a small town, and you are caught up in this kind of range of one of these Herdstones, even if you never see a Bray Herd or a Beast of Chaos, maybe there's like a mountain dividing you, but the magic is still hitting you, your children will be mutating. Your livestock will go feral. All these kind of weird things will start happening, and chaos will infect you. And Herdstones can take a lot of different forms. We just got a model for one of them, and it looks fantastic, but they can be a lot of different things. For example, the ones they're giving us in the book, there's one in Akshi that's made of like volcanic glass. The one in Haish, which is a realm of light, is made of crystals. Because what it's made of, physically made of, is kind of secondary. Because it's just like its creators. This kind of unholy mix of something natural, meaning in their case the beasts and the men, and then kind of infused with this power of chaos to make it just wrong. So even though a Herdstone is physically made of a piece of metal or glass or crystal or that, it's the fusion of chaos power into that makes it so infectious and wrong and warping in the realms. And as tribes and armies of beasts of chaos move, they erect these things. They're kind of like giant monoliths. And they might bring them up just because they've traveled a great distance, or they've conquered a particularly large foe, or toppled a fortress. They'll build a herdstone there and kind of worship the power of chaos itself. If a particular beast lord devotes himself to a chaos god, which does happen, like I said, it will reflect it in the herdstone. So we'll jump into the great phrase later on, but if you're dedicated to corn, you might have like a huge pyramid of skulls at the base of your herdstone, just for example. But if another lord who doesn't worship corn usurps you, he will tear it down and erect his own herdstone. So these things are kind of in flux. They're not like permanent fixtures in the mortal realms. But when you think about the fact that you can tear down one and erect another that's like divided or chaos divided, whatever you want to call it, to that end, they really reflect the spiritual direction of the tribe, and they're also a testament to their conquests, because they're erecting them as they're conquering things. So it kind of has a dual purpose there, and in fact one more, because again it has that huge area of effectability of projecting chaos power into the realms. Now what I will say is this week is going to be a lot to take in. This book is jam-packed with information, but when you put it all together, what you get really is a wild and savage faction that can look like just about anything. It's been around since the time of the realms began, and they are a true reflection of a chaos faction we haven't seen yet in Age of Sigmar. They're flexible in their devotion, they can be aligned, but they're often not. And they don't care about authority or land or fortresses, because they operate in a might makes right kind of culture. Functionally, they act as a wave of chaos, scouring the realms, moving to an area, toppling civilizations, sowing the seeds of evil, which is Herdstone in this example, and then moving on to another one. And just as the Beastclaw Raiders leave a trail of like the nearly everlasting winter where there's just this trail of snow, whatever, they leave a path of mutation and horror and evil and debauchery. They are raw, wild, savage, and are dedicated to making the realms the same way. And that, friends, is probably the best introduction I can do to a faction that is so huge, so vast, so many smaller little sub-factions kind of crammed in there together. It's hard to have one unifying message for them. But I did the best I could. In this video, we try to talk about what Chaos Undivided is and what the Beasts of Chaos generally are. And we're going to be basically breaking this book down into like sub-factions like Brightherd, Warherd, Thunderscorn, the random beasts that are all around the realms, how the great phrase work, Star Collecting Box reviews, a lot of interesting stuff. So stay tuned. What I will say here though, I just want to put this on, this makes me so incredibly excited for a Dark Oath faction because I feel like they really nailed the idea of Chaos Undivided in this book. It is deeply fascinating to read, and we're going to dive into it even more throughout the week. So if you are at all interested in this faction, or you know someone who is, go ahead, click like and subscribe, and tune in as we dive deeper into the Beasts of Chaos. Thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.